Hey, everybody. Welcome. This is our LinkedIn Live event, the Inclusion Initiative. We're just going to give everyone a couple minutes to finish their dinner and get on their computers and join us. And we're really excited to have this conversation with you. All right. So hopefully you're all settled in. You've got a nice cup of tea. You can get cozy for this discussion. I'm really excited to be presenting this today with my friends. And so I'm Grace Foster. I'm the founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative. And we are closing the opportunity gap for transracial adoptees and foster care alumni. It's my pleasure to host this event. It's my pleasure to introduce my two guests. So we've got Miss Stephanie Veneri. Stephanie, did I say that correctly?
You did. You nailed that, actually. Usually people have to really like Venery. It's like, no, you nailed it. That was really good.
Awesome.
Really good.
So you're a voice and life coach, you're a speaker, you're a mental health advocate, and you're a transracial adoptee.
Yes, ma'am.
And it's been awesome just meeting you recently through the work that we're both doing, being advocates and supporters of our communities. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing what you're doing. There's a lot of things that I see today that I wish I had when I was like 15.
Yes.
That would have helped a lot. Yes. Right? And then he's like,
Me too. Yes. And our other guest,
being who you needed when you were younger, is a great way to start. If you're, kind of, you don't know where to what to do next. Be who you needed when you were younger.
Amen.
That's right. That's right. And my next guest is Anthony Walsh. Mr. JD, congratulations on your recent graduation. That's so exciting. We're really proud of you. Yay. That's awesome. And you are the author of the amazing kids book, Hockey is for Everybody series. And yeah, it's a fantastic book. I recently was able to read it and I really enjoyed it. And you're also the director of Charles and JLLC and a transracial adoptee. So welcome to the stage. Really appreciate both of you being here to help further the advocacy and awareness work around our community and our lived experiences. So I just want to kick us off. And first of all, just set the tone for our event with those of you tuning in. So first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for caring about our lived experiences. And thank you for wanting to support, wanting to uplift, wanting to elevate, wanting to be better allies to transracial adoptees and foster care alumni. And so we're going to be sharing our stories, our thoughts, and our perspectives around how different these lived experiences can be and why it's important to understand that and know that. And so we'd love for you to engage with us. You have the ability to like and love and support all the reactions on LinkedIn Live with the reactions feature. And there's a comments feature. So we can see any questions that you have. If you want to type in questions in the comments or just, give us a high five in the comments, please do that. And we'd love to see that. And there's Stephanie's virtual.
I'm ready. I'm
Yeah.
ready. First one.
So yes, let's get started. All right. So really, I think what would be really interesting and important to start off with is sharing a little bit about ourselves and why we're here today. And, for myself, like I shared, I'm a transracial adoptee. I'm also a foster care alumni. So I have lived experience as both. And like we've been talking about at the beginning of this event, we wish we would have had some of these resources, knowledge, like access to information and models, right, of how to engage and talk about our lived experience, and that it was okay. It was okay to do so. It was okay to be authentic and honest about it. And the experiences vary all across the board. And so, for me, I was brought to the US after being abandoned in South Korea, spent some time in a couple of orphanages. I have the very, common South Korean adoptee story of, not knowing anything about my birth parents, not having any of that history, was given up for unknown reasons, and was brought over to the US by a family in the Midwest, where they had 3 biological kids of their own. And they wanted a fourth. And I think they were going through a little empty nest, syndrome a little bit. Their kids were a little older, but they had like a 10-year-old that they wanted a playmate for. So or I think he was 8 at the time. And so I ended up living with them for a couple of years. The mom was Japanese, the dad was white, and he had served in Korea during his time in the armed forces. And that was some of their influence of choosing Korea as a country to adopt from. Long story short, they didn't quite understand, right, the nuances and complications of adoption, especially transracial adoption, intercountry adoption, and then adoption of an older child, which I was. I was 5 when I came over. And so one day they brought me into their bedroom and they told me that I was a bad child. They didn't want me anymore and I was going to be leaving. And literally 2 days later, I left. I got in the car with the social worker. It was very quick. It was, for a 7-year-old at the time, it was, I didn't really know what was happening, but I knew what was happening. And I just remember like looking out the back window of the social worker's car and thinking like, I'm alone. What am I going to do? And I was placed into foster care into a family that had quite a lot of foster children and adopted children, and spent about a year in their home and then was eventually adopted by them. And the family was huge. It was nearly 20 people in that family of all different races, from different countries, a lot of domestic adoptees in the US. So I had a really unique experience that way. And the parents that adopted me were white, and are white, I should say. And I was in a pretty predominantly white community. And you can see that, not looking so white. And that was definitely something that I really struggled with my entire life, even into my adulthood. I was coached, encouraged, taught that white was the way. So I was assimilating every way I knew how, completely rejecting my my heritage, my culture, even what I look like. And so all of that being said, right, I learned all of these harmful narratives, internalized racism, all the things. And it was really hard. It was really hard to, as an adult, realize that this is how I internalized everything. And, to complicate things further, right, my experience and relationship with my adoptive family is not strong. It's not good. It's not bad, right? It's not like crisis mode or tumultuous. It's broken. It doesn't really exist anymore. I'm estranged. So the lived experience, right, that I have is unique to me, and it has a lot of similarities to many people that I know who are adoptees, transracial adoptees, or have been in the foster care system. But also, it's also complete. There's parts of it that are completely different, that are so unique. And so, that's part of why we are here today, to hear just different experiences and to appreciate and recognize that these are real things that happen to transracial adoptees and foster care alumni. There are really great things that have happened, like in the home that I grew up, good memories too, right? Fun times, and things that I'm really happy that happened, and things that I'm really happy that I got an opportunity to do. But it doesn't take away, right, from the challenges and the barriers and the hardships that also came with it. So you've heard now a little bit about my story, and I want to turn it over to one of my guests here, to share a little bit more about their background and their experience, and their adoption story. So, Stephanie, did
I
you want
vote.
to kick us off?
Oh, I vote Anthony.
Or Anthony?
That's funny. I was going to vote Stephanie,
Oh,
but
shocked. I said it first. So
yeah, no, you're
Anthony
good. I'll go. Thank you, and for the vulnerability that we're gonna share in this moment. So yeah, just a lot of what you have said resonated with myself as well, and had a very different experience as you alluded to. So I was born in Washington D.C. and given up for adoption in a foster home right away. I spent a few months there before I was adopted to Minnesota, and then grew up in Minnesota with white parents, and um, marked by a lot of just like hockey. And we moved to a town that is like known for that, etc. And so that's something that I was kind of like doing for a while. And then I found myself after that going out to Canada for a bit, and then going to school. And so I went to school at University of North Dakota and studied abroad a few times and did all that. But in that same vein, I had taken a DNA test thinking that I was Jamaican. I wanted to know if I was Jamaican. That's something that you figure out when you're adopted, is that you'd have no connection to your lineage, to your ancestry. It's quite awful, in my opinion. But, again, and shrouded, and I positive experience, but shrouded in those kinds of things where like nobody doesn't like to know where they came from. So anyway, long story short, had that happen, happenstance, hit with a biological aunt. And from there, my mother had denied me at that time. It was a closed adoption. I found that out, or I knew it was closed, but just the nature of it, nobody knew that I existed. So me coming out of nowhere wasn't just absolute shock. I went out to Europe after that, studied abroad, did a bunch of other things again. But before I had left, I found out that I had a brother who was in federal prison for gun charges. And so, and less than a year older than me. And so that always kind of stuck with me as like, well, potentially, right, like circumstantial, all that kind of stuff. The more information I got to know, and the more I, was like, okay, well, cool. I'm starting to figure it out. And, this is X, Y, and Z, right? Without comparing, lives, et cetera, because I have now, again, a full idea of what everything looked like. And, just 6 and 1/2 dozen the other, right? Just different lives that you're living. Like, I don't advocate for separating, families apart, but just sometimes obviously that's the case. And so I had that happen. I met my biological family on my mom's side, my dad's side, siblings, and grandparents, aunts, uncles, That was really cool just because, and I know we'll get to this a little bit, but like my brother, for instance, and at least at the time, maybe it's changed now, but he's had absolutely zero interest in, at least outwardly, about trying to find out who he is, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. And so we were always very different. So like this is something that I had, thought of having happen, since I had been a kid, and when it all manifested into what it was, I was very grateful for that. Fast forward now, George Floyd was murdered in Hennepin County, Minneapolis. I grew up here, and so I was living in Washington, D.C. I was going to law school. I just gotten done working for Heidi Heitkamp, who's a senator at the time. I was working at a think tank while I was actually going to law school, and so I was just immersed, right? Like I was just living my life, and a pandemic happened, so everything slowed down, and then George Floyd being murdered in Minneapolis made me have a W.B. Du Bois moment where W.B. Du Bois, sociologist, he was walking to go turn in one of his papers, looked over, saw Samuel Hose's knuckles being sold at the corner store. Samuel Hose had gotten lynched, which was, happened to Black people and particularly Black men in the South a lot. And he just at that moment said, I could no longer be a sociologist. I can't be a scientist. Like, Black folk use a different word, but we're getting murdered systematically in the streets, and I got to do something. So I felt that. I felt that deeply. I moved back to be who I needed when I was younger, and the idea that if that in itself, because of again my background I explained, would bring healing to this otherwise very tragic situation. And so did that. Ended up graduating from school. I now work with Hennepin County from a community engagement standpoint, and looking forward just to continuing to do these kind of things. But I do think that like being adopted also kind of, for right or wrong, gives me at least more of a mission in life and a purpose that if this thing happened, right, to make the most of it, to make the best of it. Like I was kind of advocating earlier, right? Like I can't advocate for splitting children from their families, but like if God forbid that happens, I'm like, I do feel grateful to have had the life that I've had. And so that is, again, not saying anything other than the fact that I know that I'm so blessed and I'm so lucky. And so that's, again, why I just continue to do what I do. But so grateful to be sharing space with both of you. And that is a quick version kind of the last 20 so years of my life.
Yeah, no, that is so great. Everything that you shared, and like recognizing that there are multiple truths to the lived experiences of people who are adopted and people who are in foster care. So it's really important to honor that and recognize that. So really appreciate you sharing your story. And yeah, just congratulations on everything. You've had quite a journey in these last few years. So that's fantastic.
Well, thank you. And I am more than excited to hear about Stephanie. So
Yes, yes. So kicking it off, Stephanie, would love to hear as much or as little about your experience and whatever you like to share with our audience.
Yeah, absolutely. First, my name is Stephanie Veneri, and it's funny that you brought it up of how to mention it, because that's something that I've always had to justify, is the fact that my last name is Italian and I don't look Italian. I don't know if you guys have gotten that before, but so a lot of my childhood has been with like friends and family and teachers, and be like, oh, Veneri, that's Italian. How does that work? And it's like, well, that's not really a question, but all right. So I've always had to justify myself. So born into a white family. My dad is Italian. My mom is French Canadian. I was adopted at 4 months old from Haiti. And I have 2 older siblings as well. One is from South Korea and the other one is from Haiti as well. So we were adopted all at very young ages. We were months old when we got to Canada. And we, lived in this predominantly white environment for most of the time. My parents divorced very early. I was 3 when they divorced and decided to go their separate ways. So adopted kids, and then it was just kind of a broken home already. So it wasn't ideal. But I did what I could, and I really focused on it. It's so funny that we all kind of had a moment of focusing our energy on something, which I completely did with my singing. My singing was my thing, and I full on just like was doing performances and writing and learning instruments and doing all that stuff. So I didn't have to think about the rest of it because it was really, really tough. I think that we want to believe that adoption is such a beautiful thing, and it can be, most definitely. And the fact that some people have had amazing experiences, I love that. I love that so much. And I want people to understand that this isn't a point where we're bashing people and we're bashing our families. It's literally just being able to be heard. And I think that that's one thing that we kind of forget to do with adoptees, because we have this narrative of what they should be, and they should be grateful and they should be thankful, and that's lovely, but there are other things as well. So I'm really excited to be here today and be able to talk about these things and have these really open, honest conversations. I've got a lot of family that's here listening today who, you know, are not transracial adoptees, or just here to hear and understand what's been going on. And being able to share my story is really important to me, because not only am I sharing my own, I'm sharing my brother's. And my brother, David, who also was adopted from Haiti, passed away of an accidental drug overdose last November. And that's been a whole thing of really having to uncover how he got to the point of being 33 and not here on this earth anymore. So there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of having to dig deep into figure out who we are and who I am. And I feel like I'm sharing his story because he's not here to do it. And one of the things that I know he would have loved is to realize that there's a community for transracial adoptees. Transracial adoptee is a term that I don't think I've ever heard until I was probably in my 30s, right? That was never discussed. I've been called an Oreo. I've been called black on the outside, white on the inside. I've been called an Oreo multiple times. I don't think I've been called a transracial adoptee. And I think my brother also didn't get the opportunity to be called or consider himself a transracial adoptee because he was gone by the time this had kind of come up and had these conversations in community. So I'm here to talk about it, the good, the bad, the ugly, the scary, the vulnerable. And I'm really excited because your stories are so great. I know that our stories are so different, but we all kind of have we have similar themes in it. And it's really nice just to be able to like talk and just see you guys just like nod. Like I don't have to say much, but you guys just kind of understand. And that's huge. So thank you.
Stephanie, do you think that, and you're still unraveling it because it happened last year, and if just again, not wanting to talk about it like we kind of discussed, but just do you were there struggles that involved being a transracial adoptee that helped lead your brother potentially to a place that he was at, and that's helping again as well because he didn't feel accepted, or he didn't feel, and as we again all know, right, it can be easy to fall into patterns because again we had this primal wound, we were taken, this traumatic incident that happens, right? Like we are PTSD victims that aren't actually treated as such. And so I just wondered if, again, you maybe questioned that thought.
It's a really good question. Thank you for asking it. And I'll explain the situation. The answer is 100% yes. I think what we really tend to do with people who have addiction is just think of them as a stat. They're drug addicts. They chose this life. This is what they decided to do. Go get a job, right? So many of that, if you heard, and I don't know if it's like that in the US, but I believe that it is in Canada. It's the same thing. My brother's story started with him being told when he was a child that his adoption story was he was found in a dumpster, right? So he's about 7 or 8 years old, and this is a conversation he's having with our parents, and it's being told you're found in a dumpster, you have no real birthday, there's no information, but someone found you, put you in the orphanage, and then we bought you. How do you get past that? How do you get past that if you're not able to talk about it, right? So already him thinking of being considered a dumpster baby, which I think a lot of people are in third world countries and places where adoption is really big. So that was really big for him, and he was never able to get used to that. And our parents divorced. So that was a tough go as well, having to go back and forth and figuring out and picking sides and things like that. So there was that. There was a lot of, neglect. He had a learning disability that really nothing happened. He was dyslexic and really struggled in school, so never got a chance to graduate high school, never got the help that was required in that stuff. And in a white environment, right, we both had to struggle with being the only Black people in this town, in our schools, in our communities, with our friends. So not only is it you're trying to fit in, like you're not, right? We're trying as much as we possibly can because that's what's told to us, but we can't fit in. And there's the racism part of that, but there's also the adoptee part of that, because I remember a lot of people asking, hey, why are you Black? I remember that happening to me. I was like 8. I was like, why are you Black and your parents are white? It was like, Tommy, great question. I'm adopted. And it was like, what does that mean? So already I'm having to live and explain myself and justify myself as to why I'm here. And I know that David did the same thing. We went through the same struggles. And I remember being like, okay, well, adoption. He was like, well, what's adoption? Well, adoption is, I was given up by my mom. I was like, oh, so your mom didn't want you. And it's like, yeah, Tom, I guess that's the situation. I think that's the case. And there's no other way to explain it. But that is the situation. So at 8 years old, I'm already having to justify my trauma, my experience. And I know that he had to deal with that as well. And he, at the age of 15, started doing drugs. And it was to, for sure, just push the stuff. He was really, really focused on finding out his real birthday. He would read horoscopes and be like, ooh, I could be a Taurus. I could be a Leo. And everybody was like, oh my goodness, get over it. And it's like, but we can't get over that if we don't have that information, right? Like some people live their lives with the horoscopes, right? But if you don't know that, we don't have that opportunity to do that. So 100% the way that how his life happened was most definitely because of being a transracial adoptee in a white environment. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I think that was the big problem for me, is a lot of people who might not have known my brother very well were really good at saying David struggled. He had some problems. He was schizophrenic at the end of it. He was addicted to drugs. And I'm like, let's actually go back and really discuss the situations. So when he passed away, I wrote something on Instagram, just kind of writing a little memorial thing. And I showed it to my mom, and she said, was David did it really bug him that he was adopted? And I love that both of you just had this look. So it was really tough to just be like, I didn't want to get into it. And I just said, well, if you have to ask that question when he's already dead, it's way too late. Right? It's way too late. And this is the problem that I have, is we're not giving adoptees the chance to speak. We're not giving the adoptees a chance to be heard. And this is why we're here, and this is why we're doing what we do, because we've lived it. And my motto will always be, I want to be the person that I needed growing up, and I became that person. That's my motto through and through for years. And that will always continuously be the thing, because if I was able to talk to 8-year-old Steph, I'd give her some wise words. If I was able to talk to 8-year-old David, I'd give him some really wise words on how to continue, how to proceed.
Yeah.
And for anybody struggling out there, I just really want to say that as well. Please reach out.
Mm-hmm.
We need you here. So reach out. And us as well. But just hearing that, because your brother didn't deserve that, right?
No.
And so if you speak out, and I'm glad that we're doing this. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Anthony, for calling that out. Really important to highlight and continue to repeat, loudly repeat, because adoptees, foster care alumni don't hear that a lot, right? They hear you're resilient, you're self-sufficient, you're so strong, you can figure it out, you got this. It's like, in the inside, we're like, no, we need help. We need support. We need just someone to listen for a minute without pushing our stories aside and just being like, well, you got through it, so you're fine. So thank you for calling that out. Stephanie, you really transitioned us nicely into the next phase of our discussion, which was to talk about how our lived experience can be so different, even from the siblings that we have who are transracially adopted or in foster care with us. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit because it really does highlight just how different people have these experiences. Even within the same home, it can vary so much. And a lot of folks don't realize that or understand that. And so when they're hearing some narratives at times about, right, how um, things were awesome or things were awful, it's so one dimensional. You're not hearing like the totality of all the experiences within that family. You're hearing just the one perspective, and then it gets, cut off, or that's enough, right? We get shut down. So all of us have experience with siblings in our family. So we heard a little bit about yours, Stephanie, and I do want to come back to that. But Anthony, I would love to hear a little bit more about your experience with your siblings and anything that you would like to share with the audience in regards to how your experiences might have differed.
Yeah. So like I have my adopted siblings and I have my biological. And so with my brother, he just is a little different, doesn't really see a need to, at least I believe so, do any searching, all that kind of stuff. I think maybe he just moved to Arizona, like, so I'm not sure necessarily what that was about. He was born in Washington, D.C. as well, but just that, he's, here and there, I believe, maybe not diagnosed, but struggled with a few things as well, obviously. And, we all have, but just that I attribute, I think, that as well, like as maybe just seeing things sometimes and how things manifest in drinking and et cetera, all that kind of stuff. And so that is a thing he's doing like a lot better now. Like he's, again, just like having a great life. So I don't know where he stands, but that was, him. My sister is my adopted sister, not biological, but she is really successful, worked at Google and like worked, again, she just does a bunch of incredible stuff. And she's really cool. And so our relationship's always been like decent, like good, but it's gotten stronger as we've gotten older and had a chance to actually like talk about things like, like what, because, we're all having our experiences. I think that's something that I realized as well as like an adoptee, like you're kind of saying, it's like, as rightfully so, when we're younger, we're kind of focused on ourselves, but then you start to get a little bit older and it's like, well, what did my parents go through? What am I, what was it like having somebody come into the house that wasn't your biological sibling who is now being called your brother and blah, 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 that kind of stuff, so it's just like that, like, so just thinking again of like somebody else's perspective, I've started doing that more. And so that's really cool. I do know my biological siblings. So I have about 13 of them there. And this is something I really struggled with recently, but I'm at a good point now by having spoken with my biological mother, a couple of my professors from law school or from undergrad, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. But I have a good relationship with the majority of my siblings, but a few of them I don't. And I felt kind of guilty about that for a while. And my professor was like, I don't get along with 13 people. So like, literally, like you're good. Like, you're good. Like, and I'm like, oh, like, okay. So that's another thing I want to tell people is like, give people a shot, give them a shot. But just that, like, at the end of the day, like, you still have your life, right? Like, you have, you can't erase the 20, for my case, 25 years. We're building where we build. And I've really enjoyed that. And I will continue to do that. And I'm so grateful. Like, I value our relationships, honestly, over the moon. But just that, like, you can't take away 25 years. And so just, as I start to, there was people I would meet, and again, by just different environments, right? Like we are doing different things. And at the end of the day, I just kind of felt like, okay, well, like my life is still my life. I still have my purpose, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. Like, and I we're in each other's lives in a sense, but it's just not like a kind of thing there. But then I have some other siblings, like my sisters, who are awesome. Doing awesome things. Like I have a brother who is like a legitimate model for New York Fashion Week and all that, and so like that's really cool. I found out that Marvin Gaye is my second cousin, so my mom's first cousin, and so like that's super cool, right? Like you go places and right, like kind of like Stephanie was talking about earlier, it's like people will be like, my great great grandfather was like General Cornwallis of like blah blah blah, and you're like, oh, like that's oh, like and you can never do that because it's just, but like, and so that was something that when I just like was like, wow, like thank you in the sense of like having the idea, like those are things I really struggled so hard with growing up, going to the doctor's office and they're like, oh, family history, and you're just like, oh, I can't go anywhere without being reminded of this, like so yeah, anyway, like it was a interesting thing there, but yeah, like I really enjoyed my time getting to know my siblings on that side. My relationship with my siblings that I grew up with is growing stronger, and I think that two things can be true at once, where like you can be curious and want to get to know people, and it's not a selfish thing. It's just like it's something that we owe it to ourselves. That's what we want to do, and that because I did have a couple, again, like right, trying to say siblings trying to say stuff here or there, right, about like you doing this X, Y, and Z, right? Maybe some jealousy. I don't what I'm saying, like stuff like that occurs where you're like, you have no effing idea like what this is like. Like, sure, oh, like food is. I mean, what I'm saying, but like, they're like the daily struggles of, again, like you're saying, of like having to go through that kind of stuff is, you can't weigh that. That's the life I have. I don't want I can't change it, but to claim that, oh, I would have traded places with you and et cetera, blah blah blah. It's like you don't know what you're talking about, and so like that's something you might have to deal with. Is the minimization of something like that, and then, but my biological mother's an absolute gem. She's so cool. Same with like my biological father. And to your point, Stephanie, right? Like when it comes down to it, you were abandoned. You were abandoned, right? You know what I'm saying? Like that's just fact. But like there's potentially reasons why you were abandoned, and then we've talked about it. I'll tell adoptees, you're never going to get there's never a right answer, but you gotta forgive, because it's only going to eat away at you. And so I've been really blessed to, again, have, experiences good and bad, to be able to share, with people. And so I've had people ask, do you regret going on your search, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. And I would say absolutely not. And I would do it again 150 times over. And again, happy just with life. So that's kind of the sibling situation. Open to growing relationships, but just that like perspective wise, again, just like, we're on different schedules, we had different values, et cetera, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. You're allowed to be a human being. Like you're allowed to be your own person. It's okay that things don't always work out one way or the other, right? Because as transracial adoptees, as foster care alumni, we literally were put into situations that we didn't ask to be in, and sometimes multiple times. Right? If we weren't allowed to stay in a certain family, then complete strangers would decide for us where we would go next. And I want to touch a little bit on what you talked about, Anthony, when you said you felt guilty. And a lot of us, I think probably all of us at one point in time, of course we feel guilty, because the dominant narrative about adoptees and foster care foster care youth, is that you should be grateful. You should take what you get, because it would have been that much worse for you if the people, like white people or other people, stepped in. If they didn't step in and save you, right, you would have been in this dire situation. But like Stephanie's story, her brother ended up in a dire situation, even though he was saved. And so, like, this guilt is super heavy for a lot of us. We walk around with it all the time because we want to be whole, real, authentic people, but we are constantly put into this box of, no, this is what you look like, this is what you sound like, this is how you behave, these are the things you're allowed to say when it comes to talking about our experiences as adoptees and foster care alumni. And so we are never fully able to be our real selves, our whole selves in any situation we walk into. That's really, really hard. So I just wanted to touch on that guilt piece
Bring up
because it's
just thinking about that, right? Where it's like this idea that like you're saying, like, right, like that is, like our identity, right? Like becomes like something like that, right? And like that, just to your point again, it's like that is all like the idea that like kind of again with your brother, for instance, Stephanie, that he was meant like, like that is what drove him, not validating how he felt, right? Like he's sitting here being like, I literally feel like, I'm hurting inside and like people are telling me I should be grateful. And just so it's like, sorry, I just like, I hear that and I'm like, again, having the good experience that I've had, I've still questioned hearing stuff like that because again, it's just like I was saying, like, hearing like a brother being like, oh, I would trade places with you or something like that. It's just like, you don't know any of the ideas that, any of the struggles that, again, like you talk about adoptees, although different stories, like having similar veins of isolation, loneliness, feeling again that just like we were dumpster babies, mistakes, etc. And so just you saying that brings me back to Stephanie's brother, where it's like, again, it's just like we are told, so often that again, our situation is, we should be grateful. And then we see instances of like Chilean adoptees who were, when they really find out what happened to them, they were kidnapped and, their mothers are looking for them. And I should be grateful. Like, so anyway, sorry. Like I just,
yeah,
it's no,
don't apologize. Don't apologize. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with that alone. No, so don't apologize for that because it's, it's something we haven't been able to talk about enough. So I totally hear you and understand where you're coming from. And, you touched on reunification and just like how you found your biological family. So I want to dive into that in a minute. But I wanted to ask Stephanie, you, if you had like thoughts around what we've been talking about in terms of the guilt, but also I would like to ask both of you this question, right? Before we transition to the reunification and birth search conversation. For our audience, for our supporters, for people that want to be allies, for people who share our lived identities that are listening right now, what is the thing, maybe the guidance, right? Because we all wanted us when we were 10, 12, whatever age. So what is that one thing that you want people to walk away from today, like really sticking in their minds? And Stephanie, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'll go first with that. That's a really good question, of just like, how do we do better? I think one of the biggest things in my perspective, I think, is discussing mental health and what that brings with adoption. I think that not only was my brother maybe not heard, but I wasn't heard either. There's a lot of situations that have happened that we just don't really talk about. We just don't really discuss because it's uncomfortable, it's iffy, they don't know what else to respond. So there's a lot of things where I'm dealing with racism at school. I'm dealing with racism while I'm dating. I'm dealing with racism just everywhere I am, and that trauma. And people don't know how to deal with it. And I don't need you to deal with it. I just need you to listen. Right? Everybody wants to have that decision to just like always have an answer, right? Half of the battles, half of the fights we have is someone just needing to prove that they're right. With adoption, it's not really like that. We don't have a right or wrong situation. We have a narrative that people believe we should have, But that's not how it goes, right? I could be thankful for the opportunities that I've gotten, not no longer being in Haiti, but I can also struggle and cry about the fact that there's abandonment issues, and cry about the fact that my brother's dead of a drug a drug overdose at the age of 33 years old, and he had never got the chance to really shine. I can be sad and be questioning what life could have been if I wasn't adopted, right? The thing that people really want to say when it comes to adoption, especially in Haiti, right? Haiti is, people have a lot of comments about Haiti and this third world country, and people always go that if you weren't here, you'd be dead. And there's like no in between. And it's like, well, there could be an in between. Things could have been very different. But people don't really want to talk about that. They want that gratefulness. They want that for you to be so thankful for where you are and not talk about it. And it's funny because millennials these days, you hear it, you see it, people are like, I am healing my inner child. And it's like, that's really great, where you're going through these things and you're discussing what needs to change, and you're, doing things that you wish you could have done as a child. And it's like, that's the new thing, is healing our inner child. But as an adoptee, you don't get to do that. You don't get to do that. You don't get to talk and try to heal your inner child. You get to be grateful and call it a day. Right? So we really have to stop assuming what adoptees are feeling and just listen. Right? You must be so grateful. Are you going to ask me what I think, or did you already make that decision? Right? And it's such a complex situation, is being adopted. There's just so many things to it. There's so many things to understand. And in order to understand a little bit better, is we need to listen to the adoptees today. And I don't think that us as children had the opportunity to talk about these things and go, hey, here are the things that I'm struggling with. Here are the things that I find are quite hard. How can we do better? And that is probably the most important thing, is that all adoptees need to be heard. And don't just dismiss. Don't gaslight their experiences. Don't dismiss their struggles. I just remember so many times where I'm going and I'm crying to people and I'm like, hey, this is what happened. It really, really sucks. It's not great. And they're like, okay, but like, think about it. Like, you could still be in Haiti and you'd probably be dead. Oh, end scene. Like, that's the end of the conversation, because where do you go from that? Where do you go from that with my anxiety here to potentially being dead? So you completely didn't listen to anything I said, and then I don't get to talk about the struggles that I have. So that, to me, is the most important thing. And as a voice and life coach, my biggest thing is to listen, right? Yes. I'm here to make sure that people are listening and that they're heard. And that is so important, because mental health is so important in a life. And I can guarantee you that mental health wasn't a thing that we discussed as a kid. That wasn't a necessity to really talk about.
Right.
And that's when you start to suffer in silence, and you find other ways to cope with that. So my brother was drugs, and for me, it was eating. I had such a struggle with, weight gain, weight loss, because it was like the only thing that I can control. Yeah. So pick your vice, right? But something's going to get you to kind of remove that loneliness, and food gave me that comfort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
can relate, Stephanie. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And 100% agree that the focus of, the healthcare industry, mental health industry, right, hasn't yet carved out and really provided that specific resource for people who are adoptees and for people that have been in the foster care system. It's always like, yes, and like, this is a mental health resource if you're battling PTSD, or you have a mental health disorder that's diagnosed, and then, oh, okay, and you're an adoptee. Okay, we can like work that in. And it's like, no, we actually need the resource for us having lived these traumas and still experiencing these traumas and challenges, we need therapists and we need that professional support specifically to address our lived experience as adoptees and as foster care alum. So, yeah, I love that you highlighted that. And I love that you highlight, one of the big takeaways that you want people to walk away with is shut up and listen. Shut up and listen, and then don't talk at all. just listen and support.
It's so true. It's so true. But it's like, when you're fighting and you're just like, oh yeah, well, and you're like, yeah, well, I'm gonna up you. And it's just like, okay, no one needs to be upped. We can just like let it slide and just be there and listen. Same thing, right?
Yes.
We don't always have to be right and have an answer for everything, which is very common.
Right, exactly. So I do want to transition us to reunification and finding our thoughts and our perspectives on finding our birth families. But Anthony, what is that one thing that you want people to walk away with from this evening's conversation?
Great. Oh my God. I was like, oh God, I hope I get a chance to say that. Yeah, it's crazy because like I actually had a completely different thought in my head, and then Stephanie again started talking about like the gratefulness and like so it's really interesting, right? You were talking about being like how people want to box you, right? Oh, your experiences, you're blah blah blah. So I don't know if you ever got this, Stephanie, but anybody ever call you like light skin? Where they're like, oh, like you have a light skinned upbringing because like you are, black-ish, and like I am black 100%, but just that like,
Blackish, yeah.
well, yes, like people are biracial, right? Sometimes
so
people
true.
say stuff like that. So just that like, they in their mind are like, oh, like you have dark skin, but you speak a certain way, your family's a certain way, you must be, this is a light skinned existence, right? And something I want to leave people with again is like, let us be, right? Like we are, I'm an adopted black man, and like that is my existence. That's all I've ever known. Like, and black man is there, but I will always identify as an adoptee, right? Like because there's even after reunification, I was still adopted. I still had 25 years of separation and etc. So just you brought that up, and yeah, something I would leave, right? A couple things, but that was one of them is just that like, the idea, right, that like stop boxing people, just let people live, don't, even if you're curious, who cares? Just keep it yourself, right? Like nobody goes up and asks you these kind of questions you want to subject other people to. So that are when you hear that, oh, you're adopted, I'm like, so that's one thing. Another thing I would say, right, is just that so this is great too. Have y'all heard of or read The Primal Wound by Nancy Verrier? So I feel a couple different ways about that because again, she's, again, we just talked about she's not adopted, she's a mother of an adoptee, but I do think there are some interesting things in there. One thing that was said that I was reading and agreed with wholeheartedly is there's no such thing as an adopted adult, right? We're children our whole lives. I don't feel necessarily that way, but there's no adopted adults, right? Like we don't even get a chance to a lot of times like grow up in the mind of the state or in the eyes of the state, right? We're always, a lot of us aren't trusted with our birth certificates, right? Like just weird stuff like that. And so, yeah, that's something I got to believe as well. Just that like, there's no such thing as like an adopted adult, right? Like, and I think we need to maybe get to that point because that's what we're doing now, right? Because we are adopted adults, like you said, and maybe that's not a thing because like we haven't given the platforms for adoptees to speak when they're adults. So I think hopefully this is going to be something that changes, perspectives. I think also I want to just talk about like the grateful thing again because I did trigger me a little bit because it was like that comes from like all sides. Like I have that from my biological siblings. I've had that from people I grew up with, right? Like you're sitting there again being like, does anybody like take this seriously? Does anybody know that like this isn't a joke? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's just so like deflating and invalidating sometimes because it's like, again, like these are people like, I went and found, et cetera, right? And blah, blah, blah. And then again, very, very good with the majority, but some of them turns out bad. And again, it's like things of like, wanting to pass judgment again about like anything that I've gone through and looking at their life versus my life. And then to your point, Stephanie, as well, right? Like people would always say that, well, your life is like 10 times better. And I'm like, by the grace of God, like I have seen the veil on the other side. My life would have been different, but like you're sitting here acting like I maybe again, you know what I'm saying? Like things were different, but like that's the life I would have lived, and that's the life I would have lived. I live my life now. I can't go back and take anything back, but like just again to kind of like, bring that back to that point, right? It's interesting that it comes a lot of times from like multiple sides, and it can be deflating because like you just want somebody to understand. And I'll say like my parents, adopted parents, my parents, I just call them that. Like they're honestly really cool. Stephanie, you kind of talked about maybe not having a chance to discuss that kind of stuff. Like my parents are like I'm very open about everything. They were helping me search. They were helping X, Y, and Z, all that kind of stuff. So they would always have been very positive in that sense. But just again, back to it though, something I'll say, right? Like where, and I told them this as well. So if they were to like, not to be surprised, but just that like, especially for young Black children, if you're a white parent, like you need to let your kid know that it's okay to be average, right? Like, and not that you want to be average, but just that like when you're adopted, like my role models were like Alan Page, who's like this absolutely unreal Hall of Fame football player. He's a Supreme Court judge in Minnesota. Like, list goes on and on. Like, like Sidney Poitier, like, just people who are again are like effing killing it, but not everybody can kill it. And it's okay sometimes if you're not killing it, but that like as an adoptee, I always felt, and maybe that's still, I'm traumatized today because I'm always, people are like, dude, you're always doing something. And I'm like, I guess so. And I don't even see it like that, but just that, like, I think that like, again, like that is where that kind of, sense comes from and that trauma comes from, of, always having to have something that I'm doing to, again, maybe keep those ideas, those thoughts at bay.
Yep.
So yeah, like have average, just go out of your way to like, if you have an employee at work or something, like to just introduce your child to that person and so that again, like they can feel okay with like not, and like I said, I like am so blessed, I feel like with where I'm at, but like I want kids to know that no matter where you are in life, like you're valued, like your life matters, like you're good at something. Like I've excelled so much over the last like 10 years because like I got out of a system that looked and had low expectations for me. And I'm grateful again for like what has happened in my life in that sense because I have had a great education, et cetera. But just like with the hindsight of 2020, processing some of the things that happened, like I had a lot of teachers that didn't want to see me succeed, right? And that as a child, but like you don't know how to put your finger on it. And now it's like yada 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 yada. And like so yeah. So just lesson to parents that are with, especially like Black transracial adoptees, et cetera, especially just transracial adoptees in general, like to provide role models who are normal people and aren't on TV 24/7 doing all this and that. And so
yeah,
I believe that's what I
love that. I love that, Anthony, because I think you may not completely know this, but I've shared a little bit about the Inclusion Initiative and why I'm building it. And it's because, right, our identities are often unknown because we don't wear it on our sleeves, we don't wear it on our faces, but our identities as foster care alumni or adoptees or transracial adoptees, that's something that requires extra layers to share and learn about somebody. And so when we're out in society, when we're out in our communities, when we're in our workplaces, we don't see those models of people who are living normal lives, who are living incredibly successful lives, or just living the life that they want to live, who share our identities as transracial adoptees or foster care alumni. And that lack of visibility is harming our communities because we as transracial adoptees, we're like looking around. Who can support me? Who can I look up to? Who can I help even, right? With my lived experience. Like for me, never had that kind of role model in the workplace and never was able to find mentorship or like support of my lived identities in the workplace because of that. And so when I was younger, right, I didn't know what I could achieve. I didn't know that and then I didn't know it was okay to just be like normal, right? I thought I had to like kill it and crush it to be worthy of anyone, to be worthy of anything. So the inclusion initiative is being built because we need visibility of us. We need to a place, a platform, a celebrated community where people like us can see us and can see each other and say, oh yeah, oh great, he's an astronaut, that's amazing. And oh, she has 2 beautiful babies and works at home as a stay-at-home mom. Like that's also beautiful and wonderful. Like, professional lives really are so broad and can mean anything. And it doesn't, we don't have to be put in a box of being, right? A lot of adoptees are high achievers, right? Because we're always people pleasing. We're always trying to get to the next level because we think that that's what's going to make us worthy and valuable. So the inclusion initiative, we're trying to address that, at least that part of that lack of visibility, amongst other things too. But I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I did want to make sure that we have time for our last segment because this is a very important topic that really doesn't get to be talked about a lot because it is very taboo and tricky to navigate. And thoughts on reunification, finding a birth family is super nuanced, and it is different for every single one of us. Every single one of us. And so I just want to remind the audience that if you have a question, please feel free to share it in the comments because we'll try and get to your questions at the end. But when it comes to searching for birth families, trying to be reunified with our birth families, a lot of, you saw my LinkedIn post today. A lot of people stare at you and be like, don't you want to search for your family? And they're expecting you to be like, oh yeah, I totally do. I want to find them. And because of our experiences as transracial adoptees, a lot of us don't know the history of our birth families. We're not, like you said, that information is concealed, it's controlled, it's kept from us. So we don't even know. And we're given these narratives of things that are awful and terrible. And some like have really good explanations, right? Like your parents just wanted what was best for you. They couldn't give it to you, so they gave you up for adoption. Great. Others, like Stephanie, like your brother, was left in a dumpster. Like that's horrible. And so that causes us to respond to the birth search in very different ways. So people that had the wonderful stories, whether they're true or not, right? They do want to find their birth families because they're like, I want to meet these people that wanted to give me the best. And others, like me, where I'm like, I was abandoned in a market at 3 years old, left completely by myself, and was found by the police, the Korean police. So I'm like, why would I want to meet people that did that? But I also was told other things, right? That my birth mom was probably, didn't have the best vocation, like didn't have the best support and resources. It was suggested that she was on the streets and lived in a brothel and stuff like that. So it's like, for me it was like not even a question because I didn't even think that she was alive, to be honest. So I never wanted to search for her until recently when I had a little baby of my own. And that like does something to you as an adoptee or as someone that has lost, family and parents, has been abandoned like that. That does really make you look at your experience in a different way. And that craving for that inherent biological connection of family is really real when you have literally formed a human inside of you and have birthed them. So, those opinions and perspectives change as we change and as we evolve. So that's just a little bit about like my own perspective. Um, Anthony, I want to shoot it to you again because you've talked quite a bit about your reunification and your siblings that you have that are biological and your biological mom. So would love to hear what your perspective is on it. And I guess really what you would want the audience to understand in terms of how, like, the assumptions you shouldn't make about this kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And right quick as well, I think it's crazy because you talk about removal and all that kind of stuff, and I've always found it interesting that like we'll remove children from mothers' families, because they don't have the resources, and give a child to another family and give that random family government money as resources to raise that child. And so like, I look back sometimes and think about like, who ultimately sometimes benefits from something, like that. And, is this why something like, again, adoption with all the nuanced, stuff that goes on, it continues to happen because obviously people are making money. And so just I think, okay, so, oh my God, this is so crazy because I was just talking to my buddy, his name is James. More recently, he was an adoptee, biracial adoptee, white parents, transracial, and like, wants to potentially write fine, etc., but is really scared to take that jump because of similar potentially things like you had said, Grace, where like he doesn't know the circumstances of his mother, and maybe she was in a very precarious situation, right? Like it'd be better off that he didn't know that, right? I will say that like for myself, I had the exact same fear. I was like, I'm gonna meet this person and she's gonna be drugged out and it's gonna be this awful experience and blah blah blah, and I'll but that hasn't happened at all. My worst fears never manifested, and like and so just that sometimes I think, right, like you saying that, and I talked to this other kid literally last week about that as well, is like I think we all sometimes, and you're talking about misconceptions, because there's misconceptions on all sides of the board, but just that like sometimes as well, a lot of us as adoptees, I think, like want to think of the worst thing that could have happened to us in a circumstance, and that's where it landed us in this position. And like sometimes it is because we've seen that, but then other times it isn't. And so I just like sometimes don't like, if that is what's dissuading you as an adoptee, I encourage you to move forward. Like I was terrified, I had so much fear, but like powered through that because my drive, to want to know who I was outweighed the idea of being disappointed. And I'd been disappointed for 25 years, and so like it's like that what's one more thing. And so again, it turned out positive, and there's no guarantee of that. And again, there was a whole 2.5, 3 year process where like she knew exactly what was up, blah blah blah. Continued just to be like, oh no, because and my aunt, so her sister, it was an individual that I matched with on Ancestry, and like was always very adamant again that like we meet, but just because of she had my mother, biological mother, had said it just once she had relinquished the rights, like she basically, like she made that decision, and like it could be something that again she just sat and ate away at her every day, which she kind of did, so she still acknowledged that. But just you also though have to make. She had other children, right? I have 3 older brothers. I have a younger sister too, so that's always a little bit interesting, being a middle adopted child, which is just fascinating. But again, I understood because 3 older brothers and a younger sister. She'd always wanted a girl, and so those kind of things happen. So like. But yeah, so back to reunification. I think if that is something you want to do, then yes, absolutely. But I'm always not like, I don't push anybody to do anything that they don't want to do, right? Like it worked for me, and because that's what I wanted. But I know that other people like, are again just content whether they, they're just content with the life that they have, the family that they have. I don't think about those kinds of things, what they, like to say. And so yeah, I think it's really nuanced, right? It's a more lawyerly answer. It depends, right? But just again, the idea that like I recommend, if that is what you want to do, and don't let the fear of like what the circumstances of my birth, like, I don't want to say cheat you, but like, cheat you out of like having a full sense of potentially, if you can, like, who you are, like, what where you're born, et cetera, blah, blah, all the kind of stuff like that. And just like Stephanie was talking about that, right? Some people literally, like, their whole identity is wrapped up in like their horoscope. It's wrapped up in like something that, like, like we have a hard time even producing as adoptees, right? And so just like that sense again of like, when an adoptee has those feelings, like validate them, and like don't look at it as something of like them being ungrateful, or and to be honest as well, it's none of your business, people, like, as far as that goes as well. But just if you really want to be nosy, like, right, like, it's just like, it's a nuanced situation. So like, let's sit down and have a coffee or something, like, before we just start thinking that we know the single story of adoption, and we're gonna walk into a room and meet an adoptee and I'm gonna know everything about them. So
Yeah, I love that. Like, relationships are key, right? Have a relationship with the person if you're gonna be nosy like that. But then also, if you don't have this lived experience, just walk into it with that exact thought, Anthony. It's none of my business. So I don't really have a right to know, but if I have a relationship with this person, I can ask because I have that relationship and it's coming from a place of care and support and not from a place of trauma porn, right? So, anyway, that was awesome, Anthony. Thank you for sharing your perspective on that. And Stephanie, same question to you.
Number one, I love that we all kind of have different situations. I don't think that any of our, relationships or, experiences are the same. So I'm really grateful for that because you're just getting a completely different perspective. Number one thing I want to say that I forgot to say, and we kind of just touched on it, is as one thing that I want to tell adoptees, I'm going back there and bringing it back. Don't feel like it is your job or your responsibility to educate people. That is one thing that forever was never about me. If people are like, when, Tommy, who's like, hey, your mom didn't want you, what's the deal? And I'm like, Tommy, I don't know, man, but I feel like I had to discuss, I had to educate. And then going home and telling my folks, being like, wow, it's just like so frustrating. It's been asked to me like 6 times. And they're like, what's because you're new. You just need to educate them and you need to tell them. And they've never seen your hair type before. So you need them to touch it so they can understand what it is. And it's like, whoa, okay, so I have to give away some of my bubble. I have to give away some of my my boundaries to educate the people that I didn't choose to educate. And why am I doing this at the age of 8, right? It started as young as that. So for me, it's adoptees. If you don't want to talk about it, whatever the reason is, don't bring it up. Don't talk about it. Don't even humor that, because their curiosity and their nosiness is none of your concern. And that just needs to be said, because I think a lot of adoptees have been told, especially in predominantly white environments, if you're new, you're the shiny new thing, that you need to tell them why you're here and justify that. And I did that my whole entire life. And now as an adult, I'm like, no. So if I can talk to another adoptee today and let them know that you don't have to justify yourself why you're here, you don't have to justify your story, and you don't have to explain adoption to people who don't know what it is. You can easily go and look it up in the dictionary, read a book, watch a YouTube video. It's there, but it's not your responsibility to do that. That's it. I'm going to say that. However, I'm going to move on. Reunion is so interesting. And I think that, again, we have people who just want to tell us how we should be, right? Oh my goodness, you must want to do that. I don't know if I need to. I think that there's a lot of things that depend. When I was 25, I didn't go looking but my biological brother found me on Facebook. And when you're not ready, that is big. And it was terrifying and exciting, right? Because you're going through like, whoa, I'm seeing this guy, kind of looks like me. That's weird. Never seen that before. So there's like this little excitement. But I'm also getting from my adoptive parents, why are you talking to them? Don't forget, you're ours. So I already have that guilt from my family here. And now I'm trying to maybe start this relationship and this friendship with other people, with my biological family, and there's guilt, right? There's guilt because I might be ashamed. I'm feeling they might be threatened, they might be ashamed, they might be just not ready to have that conversation. And I've heard that quite often, that some people don't want to be in reunion until their adoptive parents are no longer here because they feel like there's a betrayal, right? So I think that reunion is totally different, and it's totally up to the situation. And if you're feeling safe to be able to do that in the moment, because I was not safe. I was not okay with the communication and the overflowing information that was given to me that was completely different from my birth story, right? So I was adopted. I was 4 months old. I have 2 older siblings that were still in Haiti. My dad died 2 days before I was born. That was my story. Had that story until I was 25, until that was not the story. My dad left. He had 9 other kids. And then they found out about me. So they're adding me on Facebook and they're like, all like, hey, what's up? I have a new sibling. And terrifying. And the problem is, they're not specifically reaching out to me because they want to know who I am and they want to meet me. There's some type of pressure that's coming, that happened, where I was having this conversation with my birth brother, and he said to me, our mother is sick, and it is your responsibility to take care of her and provide for her financially, because you're the one that got away. I'm not the one who got away. I was the one who was taken away. So let's just pump the brakes on that for a quick second. And what kind of so I'm already feeling guilt for my adoptive family. And then my biological family's coming up and being like, don't forget where you came from. That was mentioned to me multiple times. And as multiple cousins and siblings, and were asking me flat out for money, things. And now I'm having to support them when I wasn't ready to do that. So I had to shut the door on that conversation, and I had to tell them that I needed some time and some space to figure out what was going on, because I also wasn't feeling great with my adoptive family as well. So I had to really manage those 2 things. And in both of those scenarios, I'm an item. Don't forget, we bought you. Don't forget. So I'm like, okay, I can't forget that I was bought. Amazing. And then they're going, hey, don't forget, don't forget where you came from. And not all situations and reunions are like that, right? We've just shared that it's most definitely not like that at all. And I'm not saying that any of them are right or wrong. I think it totally depends on if you're ready and if you're feeling safe. There's a lot of grieving that has to be done when you're meeting your biological family, and the stories that you thought you knew that you don't, that are completely different now, is completely crazy. It's terrifying. And I didn't have anywhere to feel safe to talk about the big things that are happening, to find out that I have 9 other siblings. And one of the biggest things that happens is people who find out that my biological family also has 2 biological kids. And they're like, well, how come they're still there and you're not? Why were you given? And it's like, listen, I don't have those answers. And thank you for bringing it up, because it feels really good. There's always someone speaking on your behalf. And that's the biggest thing right now, is we shouldn't be feeling any certain way about reunion. That is such a personal thing that you wouldn't ask. And I think that as adoptees, we are just asked all of these really invasive questions because people are curious and because you're new, and I just don't think it's your place. And I wish I knew that as a kid. Now I'd be like, hell no, that is not a question I'm going to answer because it doesn't matter and we don't need to discuss this. But as a kid, I was fully answering all of these invasive questions every time it was mentioned. And no one should be mentioning if you've gotten in touch with your biological family. That is none of their concern. For what? Because you're going to go to Haiti and meet them, or are you just curious? Right? There's not enough of a reason for you to want to know these personal invasive things about me. To do what? So we need to make sure that adoptees are heard, right? With every scenario in this world, whether it be reunion or birth stories or whatever it is, whatever all the nuances that we have to go through. I think it's just that I'll tell you what I want to tell you.
Yeah. And I love that you are highlighting the reflective question that people should be asking themselves. Like, why am I asking? What's the purpose of me asking? Is it for me or is it for them? Is it for me because I'm curious, or do I really want to support this person through their lived experience and be a better ally and actually really truly understand what they're going through? So yeah, thank you for highlighting that and sharing that. And Anthony, you wanted to say something?
Just to round that out, I wouldn't give money to biological siblings. I dealt with that as well. And like, I would recommend not even treading that water, because it just muddies things more. Like, and like you said, at first it might be like, just, like, I just need blah, 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 or something. And you're like, oh man, I'm so excited just to be meeting these people, blah, blah, blah. And it's predatory. Like you said, unfortunately, some people have this idea that like you are, again, some conduit to make their lives better now or something, like, and they'll get better, like, financially. And it's hurtful, of course, but like at the end of the day as well, like it is something that I recommend just not even like with a rule of thumb. Just so hearing that, I'm like, oh, and I've talked to other people as well, where it's like, again, like that it's really sad that like that is sometimes common, because again, like I was saying, like the idea of, like, I would have traded places with you and blah, 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 and all these kind of things. And you're just sitting there being like, this is wild. Like, it's just so disappointing. This is so like hurtful that, this is what the purpose that you believed the reunion was for, where again, on my end, it was to, heal this wound of 25, years, et cetera, where you saw it as oh my God, I get a paycheck now, like every month, because I got the sibling who is X, Y, and Z. And so, again, it was a little bit shocking, but like hearing that it happens to other people, then it's like, it would make maybe, so just as a rule of thumb for myself, like I just recommend like not even that ever, comes into play, just like, oh, hey, no, let's just keep it where we're at, all that kind of stuff. Maybe I fly out to meet you, like, or something like that, we can grab dinner and blah, blah, blah. And like, we start to build a relationship, but like, I don't know you. And the fact that you're asking me for money is shocking. And it's just like, it's, it's hurtful. I wouldn't do that to somebody I just met, so why is it that you feel comfortable, breaking this barrier in a predatory way, using the fact that we're siblings and this is what you wanted and, all these kind of things. And so I recommend don't venturing into giving money to your biological siblings.
Thank you for saying that. I think that's really important, because I think that people, if this is coming to you, there's that guilt that maybe you should, if you could. I think people really struggle with that. But again, you're having the stranger approach you for money or approach you for things. My brother was like, hey, like I need a phone. And I was like, okay. And he's like, but Android or iPhone though, like nothing other than that. I was like, okay, so now we're being picky. So now I'm just like, I'm having to support my adoptive family and all the struggles and things that we're doing here on top of a biological family that I don't know. And it's just really tough and tricky. And again, like I said, I didn't go looking for that biological family that was approached to me. So that's really tough when it's not your choice. Will I have the choice to maybe, have a conversation with them at some point? Probably, but I'm not ready to do that. And Will I be ready? I don't know. I don't have a set deadline for that, but we'll see. It'll be my choice, and I will decide when that time comes.
Yeah, that's really important. One, you don't owe anybody anything. Adoptees, we always feel like we owe something. And two, it's your choice. Completely your choice. And three, everyone, it's not your business. Remember that. Yeah, I really appreciate both of you being vulnerable and like sharing your authentic experiences. It's just so important to better understand, even us as a community, to understand from each other the variances of our experiences. And we have just a couple minutes left. And I don't know if there were any questions from the audience. I'm not seeing any right now. But yes, this is your opportunity if you wanted to ask a question. But as we're wrapping up, I just wanted to make sure that I thanked you both for being here. It's been awesome meeting you and being in community with you, and having you in my network. I don't know why I didn't. Well, I do know why. I didn't do this 15 years ago, right? Because there wasn't space for us in the way that I feel like it's starting to happen now. But it's because, right, we're stepping up and we're starting to create these spaces and create these resources. And we're saying enough is enough. We're human first. So these identities we live with, they are ours, and they're ours to claim, and they're ours to navigate. So, we are asking now, right, society and the world, you need to honor that. And we don't owe you anything. So I really enjoyed having this dialogue with you. And I want you to share with the audience where they can find you if they want to follow your content or connect with you somehow. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
I'll go first, Anthony. You went first the last time, so I'll take this one. For me, LinkedIn, best place for sure. I'm kind of always on there. It's been my new thing. I've given up Facebook because it was just not happening for me. But LinkedIn has been a really great, wonderful, peaceful platform where I'm following people and subjects that I want. So Stephanie Veneri, find me on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram as well. You can find me at Stephanie. So it's STEFFFANY. That's my stage name. So I post things about singing and, memories and things like that about my brother and my life. And I have also a website, stephveneri.com, if you want to book a voice coach session or a life coaching session. I'm there to help you with all of these things. I don't necessarily just work with transracial adoptees as well with voice and life coaching. So anyways, welcome. And I specialize in mental health to really get that going. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much to both of you. Sharing the space has been absolutely incredible. I value this conversation that we had so much. Yeah, you can find me just on, like Stephanie was saying, LinkedIn, Anthony Walsh, just right there. You can, order my book, Hockey's for Everybody. Just Google my name and my book. Yeah, it's really cool. We didn't even dive too much into that, but again, it's like totally another thing that I try to help change the world, meeting who I needed when I was younger. But just, that was a lot of fun. And so, and yeah, social media and my book. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Grace, for bringing this together and bringing us together and approaching me for it. I was like, oh yeah, damn right, I'm going to do this. I think it's really important. And I think that all three of us are kind of like, what would our little selves say? What would they be excited about? What would they want to know? And that to me is actually so peaceful, right? So thank you so much for allowing me to have the space and even talk about my brother, who's not here to tell his story, but we've really honored him today. And if he was here, he'd be so excited. Anthony, you have this charisma that reminds me of David. You have the same smile, and it's really really calming to see and to speak to you. So thank you so much for being so nice and understanding with my situation and David's situation and being able to discuss it.
Thank you so much again for everybody. And, we're doing this at the Right for people like your brother. We need to validate adoptees. And when someone's telling you that they're struggling, don't invalidate that, right? And if you're struggling, please reach out, to your loved ones, to go a lifetime without seeing you, knowing that anything could have been done, ekes away. So please, 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 you are loved, you are valued, and reach out. So thank you so much, everybody.
Yes, and you can find us at theinclusioninitiative.com. You know where to find us on LinkedIn. I'm Grace Foster, founder and CEO. And this has been a really great conversation. Thank you for your support and for wanting to be better allies to our communities. And have a good evening. Until next time, everybody. And Stephanie and Anthony, just stay on. I'm going to end the stream now. Bye, everyone.